I had just gotten home after a long day at the office, hoping to find my wife, Jenny, in the kitchen like usual. Jenny worked, too, but she normally finished by 5 o'clock, while I wouldn't be home until 6 or later. Most nights, she'd have dinner ready, and we'd sit at the table, chatting about our day, maybe catching some TV afterward. Sometimes we'd end the night wrapped up in each other's arms, drifting off to sleep after being intimate. But that evening, the moment I walked through the door, I felt something was off. Jenny was not in the kitchen like I had expected. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with Mike Reynolds, her boss from the law firm she worked at. The two of them were too close, too comfortable, and before I could even process it, I noticed their hands, intertwined. What the hell is going on? I barked, feeling my heartbeat spike as adrenaline rushed through me. Jenny didn't even flinch. Her eyes flickered over to Mike, who gave her a slight nod. It felt rehearsed. Sit down, Dave. We need to talk. Talk about what? And why are you holding hands with your boss? She sighed, like I was the one making things difficult. This isn't easy, but we need to be honest. Mike and I, we're in love. I'm filing for divorce. It felt like the floor fell out from under me. I just stood there, gripping the back of the armchair, trying to catch my breath. You're what? I've already spoken to a lawyer. Mike has taken care of everything. All you need to do is sign the papers. She glanced at the stack of documents next to her on the couch. I'm not asking for anything. Just my personal things. Mike picked up the papers and started toward me, his smug face only making me angrier. Dave, if you just sign. Before he could finish, I snapped. My foot shot out and connected with his groin. He doubled over with a grunt, clutching himself in pain, and I followed up with a punch that landed square on his jaw, sending him crashing to the floor. You piece of trash, I growled. You knew she was married. Mike groaned, barely able to respond, and I turned my gaze on Jenny. Her face was pale, shocked, but she still did not seem sorry, more annoyed than anything. I yanked her off the couch, my hand tight around her wrist, and dragged her toward the bedroom. What are you doing? She shouted, struggling against me. I ignored her. Rage had overtaken me. I pushed her face down onto the bed and tore the sheets into strips, tying her wrists together with the fabric. She thrashed and cursed, but I did not care. I stormed back into the living room, grabbed Mike by the collar, and dragged him to the bedroom too, dumping him beside her. He was still too stunned to resist. I stood there, staring at them both, my wife, bound on the bed with her lover. It was almost too absurd to be real, like some sick joke. How about this? The two of you wanted to be together, right? Well, now you are. They both glared at me, and as I packed my things in silence, I could not help but snap a quick photo of them. It was petty, but I wanted to remember this moment. Once I had grabbed enough, I left the apartment, leaving them tied up, without looking back. I tossed my duffel bag into the back of my truck, the image of Jenny and Mike tied up in our bedroom still fresh in my mind. It was both ridiculous and strangely satisfying. But as I pulled out of the driveway, the anger started to fade, leaving behind something else, something hollow. This was my wife, the woman I had shared my life with for years. How had it come to this? I drove aimlessly for a while, not sure where to go, not ready to face anyone just yet. I could not go to my brother's place or one of my buddies. They would ask too many questions, and I was not ready to talk about it. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a little diner we used to visit, the Village Inn. It felt weird being there, but I was hungry, and I needed some time to think. As I sat in the booth, staring at the menu but not really seeing it, I could not shake the thought of Jenny and Mike. How long had this been going on? Was she seeing him when we were still making love every other night, laughing, acting like everything was normal? What a fool I had been. The waitress came by, probably noticing the faraway look on my face, and I ordered without really thinking. A burger, fries, and a slice of apple pie. Comfort food for the brokenhearted. I ate in silence, trying to push the thoughts out of my head, but they kept coming back. I had trusted her. I had loved her. And she had treated our marriage like it was nothing. Once I finished the pie, I knew I could not avoid it anymore. I had to take the next step, even if it was brutal. I pulled out my phone and dialed Jenny's sister, Sarah. She needed to know what had happened, and frankly, she could deal with the aftermath. The phone rang a few times before she answered, sounding confused to hear from me. "Hey, Dave. What's up?" I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sarah, I left your sister and her boyfriend tied up in our bedroom. You might want to go help them out." Silence. I could almost hear her processing what I had just said. What? What are you talking about?" I did not wait for her to ask any more questions. I just hung up, letting her figure it out on her own. As I left the diner and got back in my truck, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Sarah would probably tear Jenny a new one. And if there was one person Jenny feared, it was her sister. I drove aimlessly again, trying to think about where to crash for the night. I was not ready to go back to our apartment. Not yet. I needed space, time to process everything. Eventually, I found a comfort lodge on the edge of town and checked in. It was not much, but it would do for now. That night, lying in the cheap motel bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what Jenny had said. She was in love with Mike. That was rich. If she loved him so much, why had she been sleeping with me all this time? She had acted like everything was fine, right up until that moment. Maybe I would never get the answer to that. Maybe it did not even matter. Before I turned out the light, I called my boss. I needed a few days off, and I needed him to cover for me if Jenny came looking. "Just tell her I quit and left town." Maybe mumbled something about Florida, I said. He agreed, with a sympathetic tone, and wished me the best. As I hung up the phone, I could not help but laugh to myself. I was not going anywhere, at least not yet, but it felt good to imagine Jenny thinking I had disappeared. Maybe I would get to mess with her just a little while longer. The next morning, I woke up in the motel with a pounding headache. I had not slept much, tossing and turning all night, thinking about Jenny and Mike. I grabbed a coffee from the lobby and decided it was time to do something more than just stew in my anger. First stop, the bank. I needed to check on our accounts and make sure Jenny had not pulled any tricks there. But when I walked in, I realized just how sneaky she had been. She had already withdrawn half of our savings and checking account the day before. I should have known better than to think she would leave with just her clothes and personal items. But there was something she had overlooked, the safe deposit box. Jenny had always been careless about things like that, probably because she thought I would never touch it. Inside were certificates of deposit, around $12,000 worth. We had been saving for a house, each putting in a portion of our paychecks every month. But the real treasure was something she had probably forgotten about. Her family jewelry, passed down from her great-grandmother. This jewelry was worth a fortune, nearly $80,000 by my last count. It had always been a source of tension between Jenny and her sister, Sarah. Sarah thought she deserved half of it, while Jenny had insisted it was hers by birthright. Well, now it was mine, at least for the moment. The thought of Jenny's reaction when she realized the jewelry was gone made me smile. She would freak out, no doubt about it. I decided I would hold on to it for a while, let her stew, and when the time was right, I would hand it over to Sarah just to twist the knife a little deeper. Next, I swung by the hardware store and grabbed a few tools before heading back to the apartment. I knew Jenny would be at work by now, so I figured I could sneak in and grab the rest of my things. When I got to the door, I realized Jenny had changed the locks. She must have had Sarah help her out with that the night before. No matter. I still had my name on the lease, and there was no restraining order in place yet, so I had every right to be there. Breaking in was not hard. I had a screwdriver and a little determination on my side. Within minutes, I was inside, and I packed up the heavier items I needed: tools, clothes, some electronics. I loaded everything into a U-Haul and moved it all into a storage unit across town. It was not much, but it felt good to take something back. Before leaving the apartment, I rummaged through Jenny's purse and took her credit cards and cash. Then I called the credit card company and canceled our joint cards. It was time to cut off her access to any money she had not already stolen. Finally, I contacted the property management company and told them about the broken door. I figured I would let Jenny deal with that. As I was leaving, I bumped into Wendy, the manager at the complex. We had known each other for a few years. She gave me a curious look and asked what had happened. I told her the whole story, how I had come home to find Jenny with Mike and what I had done. Wendy laughed. "Wait, you really left them tied up together in the bedroom? That's priceless." Yeah, I chuckled. It felt good in the moment. Well, looks like you're free now, she said with a wink. I smiled, not quite ready to think about what came next, but her words stuck with me as I left. Free. Maybe I was. Maybe it was time to start thinking about what my life could be without Jenny weighing me down. For now, though, I had to lay low. I grabbed a stack of books from the library and holed up in my new apartment, far from the old place. Wendy had pointed me toward a quiet complex on the other side of town, and the manager there had even smoothed things over to make the move easy. It was temporary, but it gave me the space I needed. As the week wore on, I kept to myself, working during the day and spending my evenings reading. Jenny had not come looking for me yet, and that was fine by me. I was starting to settle into this new routine, but deep down, I knew the calm would not last forever. By the end of the week, I had gotten a little too comfortable in my new apartment, hiding out from the world. But I knew I could not stay in the shadows forever. When my boss called to let me know Jenny had reached out to him, asking if I had really left town, he played along, telling her I had quit and mentioned something about heading to Florida. That gave me a good laugh. It was time to stop hiding. I could not let Jenny think she had scared me off for good. So when Wendy called me, asking about the bill for the broken door, I decided to take her up on an offer. She suggested we catch up over dinner, and I could not see a reason to say no. That night, I drove over to Wendy's place. Memories of our past started flooding back, the nights we used to spend together back in high school. She had been my first real girlfriend, the first girl I had ever kissed, and the one I lost my virginity to. We had a real connection back then, but life pulled us in different directions. She moved out of town when her dad got a promotion, and by the time she came back, I was already with Jenny. I knocked on her door, and she answered with a bright smile. She looked just as good as I remembered, maybe even better. We sat at her kitchen table, sipping on a couple of beers while she finished cooking dinner. As we talked, she shared stories about her time in Colorado, how much she had loved it there, and how she had always wanted to go back. Her dad had passed away in an accident a few years ago, and that brought her back to town to take care of her mom. She was still talking about wanting to save up and move back one day. If you loved it so much, why didn't you just stay? I asked. She sighed. Mom needed me. I could not leave her here alone. Besides, life happens, right? I nodded, knowing all too well how life can pull you in directions you never planned for. Eventually, the conversation turned to Jenny. Wendy wanted to know all the dirty details, and I did not hold back. She laughed when I told her about finding them together, and she nearly fell over when I explained how I had left them tied up in the bedroom. You should have taken a picture of them, she said, giggling. Blow it up, frame it, and hang it on your wall. I smirked. Actually, I did take a picture. Her eyes lit up, and she demanded to see it. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo, and she burst out laughing. Oh my God, this is gold. We had a great time that night, laughing and reminiscing about the old days. Before I left, Wendy invited me over for dinner again the next evening, and I gladly accepted. The next day, after dinner at my apartment, we sat on the couch watching a movie, just like old times. Somewhere in the middle of the film, I realized we were holding hands, and I had no idea how it happened. I glanced over at Wendy, and she was already looking at me. Ever wonder how things might have turned out for us if my dad hadn't moved us to Colorado? She asked, her voice soft. I gave her a small smile. Every other day since I saw you again. She squeezed my hand, her expression serious. Do you think there's still something between us? I hesitated. Maybe. I like to think so. But I'm not jumping into anything until I'm officially done with Jenny. Wendy frowned. Why wait? You're done with her, Dave. She cheated on you. That sets you free. I know, I said, leaning back on the couch, but I made vows, and until those divorce papers are signed, it just does not feel right. She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. I get it, but just remember, she broke those vows, not you. I know, I replied, sighing, but it is not that simple. We had 8 years together, and even though she betrayed me, it will take time to really get over it. Wendy nodded, her hand still resting in mine. How long do you think it will take to get the papers? They're ready, I said, but part of me is still enjoying messing with her a bit, keeping her in the dark. She laughed. You are wicked. You know that? Maybe a little, I admitted, smirking. We decided to take things slow, and as we sat there in the quiet, the weight of everything that had happened felt a little lighter. I did not know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had some control again. A few days after my night with Wendy, I decided it was time to stop hiding and get back into my usual routine. There was a bowling league I had been a part of for years, and while I had considered stepping away, mostly because a few of Jenny's friends bowled in the same league, I decided to go back. Why should I change my life just because she screwed things up? That Thursday night, I walked into the bowling alley with a sense of calm, even though I knew there was a chance I would run into people who knew Jenny. As luck would have it, my team was up against a group that included Holly, one of Jenny's coworkers. Holly had always been friendly, but I knew she was close to Jenny, so I expected her to be a bit icy with me. We were in the middle of the second game when I found myself sitting next to her during a break. I had a few beers in me by then, and the urge to stir the pot just a little was too strong to resist. So, I said, leaning over, "Do you know how long Jenny and Mike have been screwing around behind my back?" Holly's face turned bright red, and she shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you're talking about." I chuckled, shaking my head. "No need to play dumb. They already laid their cards on the table. She wants a divorce so she can marry him. I'm just curious how long she was keeping me in the dark." Holly hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. Finally, she leaned in closer and said, "Honestly, about 8 months. 8 months. That hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. 8 months, huh?" I muttered, feeling the sting. She nodded, then offered a small, hesitant smile. "For what it's worth, we all think she's crazy to give you up for that guy. Is that right?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Holly grinned and leaned in a little closer. "Yeah. So, once this is all over, do you think I might have a shot?" I laughed, caught off guard. "You're serious?" "Why not?" she said, shrugging. "I've heard good things about you." I smiled, not confirming or denying anything. "I'll keep you in mind." As I headed back to the lane to finish the game, I could not help but feel a little better. Holly's interest was a boost to my ego, but more than that, it gave me a sense of power I had not felt in weeks. For once, I was the one who had the upper hand. Later that night, I caught up with Wendy for dinner, and we had a good time reminiscing about high school. But Saturday was when things took an unexpected turn. We had made plans to go out for dinner at Duke's Steakhouse and then hit up the Honky Tonk Hall for some dancing. Wendy loved country music, and the Honky Tonk had live bands every weekend. That night, Carlos Washington was playing, and the place was packed. We were on the dance floor, doing the two-step, when I saw her. Jenny's sister, Sarah, walked in with her boyfriend and another guy I did not recognize. They took the table right next to ours. I figured that was bad luck, but it got worse. Moments later, Jenny walked in. I froze for a moment, catching my breath. Of all the tables in the place, she had to pick the one right next to mine. And where was Mike? She was with some other guy. Was she already stepping out on him, too? I leaned in and gave Wendy the heads up. Wendy just smirked. "This is going to be fun," she said, her eyes glinting with mischief. Jenny still had not noticed me, but as the next song started, she spotted me across the room. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I could see the shock on her face. But her date, whoever he was, had already grabbed her by the arm and led her onto the dance floor. She kept glancing at me as they twirled around, but I just focused on Wendy, not letting Jenny's presence ruin my night. When the band announced they were taking a break, Jenny came straight for me. Wendy and I were sitting at our table, laughing about something, when Jenny planted herself in front of us, arms crossed. "So, who's your friend, Dave?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I smiled, calm as ever. "You remember Wendy, don't you? From the leasing office?" Jenny shot Wendy a cold look, and Wendy grinned back. "Oh, I know who she is," Jenny said, her eyes narrowing. "Do you always date married men, Wendy?" Wendy's laugh was sharp and unbothered. "Only when their stupid wives throw them away." Jenny's face turned red with anger as she turned back to me. "What are you doing here, Dave? I thought you left town." "I'm here to drink and dance," I said calmly. Same reason anyone comes here. Her eyes narrowed. Where are you living? I know you did not disappear. You can't hide from me. That's none of your business, Jenny. I replied flatly. Why don't you go back to your table and let me enjoy my night? You know I hate being called Jenny, she snapped, her voice growing sharper. Tough luck, Jenny, I said, my tone cold. After what you and Mike pulled, I don't really care what you hate. Wendy chimed in, her tone firm. If you don't want to end up in a hair-pulling match, you might want to leave our table. Jenny's expression hardened, and without another word, she stormed off, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Wendy leaned back in her chair, looking pleased with herself. I haven't had this much fun in a long time. The band returned, and we hit the dance floor for a few more songs. By the time we got back to our table, Sarah and her group were gone, leaving the night to wind down in peace. As I drove Wendy home later, we both shared a laugh about the run-in with Jenny. It was strange seeing her like that, still trying to control the situation, but it did not bother me as much as I thought it would. I was finally starting to let go, little by little. The encounter with Jenny at the honky-tonk did not rattle me as much as I thought it would. If anything, it confirmed what I had already come to realize. She no longer had any power over me. But that did not mean I was done messing with her. Not by a long shot. The next day, I decided it was time to put my plan in motion. I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at a bar after work. She was hesitant at first, probably worried I would drag her into the drama between me and her sister, but I reassured her it had nothing to do with Jenny. After a moment of silence, she agreed. I got to the bar early and ordered a drink, thinking about how this was going to go down. Sarah was a good person, and she had always been caught in the middle of the tension between Jenny and me. I did not want to hurt her, but I knew that giving her the family jewelry would stir things up in a way that would drive Jenny mad. When Sarah walked in, I waved her over and motioned to the drink I had already ordered for her. She sat down, took a sip, and looked at me curiously. All right, Dave. What's this about? Without saying a word, I reached down beside me and pulled out the small wooden box. I placed it on the table in front of her. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized it immediately. Her hand trembled slightly as she opened it and pulled out a diamond necklace, turning it over in her hands. This was our mom's, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Where did you find it? I didn't find it, I said, leaning back in my chair. It was in the safe deposit box Jenny and I had. I thought you should have it. Sarah blinked, her eyes wide with surprise. Why? Why would you do this? I shrugged. Because it's rightfully yours. I know you always believed you should have gotten half when your mom passed, and now you can. It's all yours. Keep it. Give half to Jenny, or keep it all. I don't care. When she realizes it's gone, I'll just tell her I pawned it. Sarah stared at me, clearly taken aback. You could have pawned it. That would have hurt Jenny a lot more. Why didn't you? Because it would have been wrong, I said simply. This isn't just about Jenny. It's about you too. You've always been decent to me, and I couldn't do that to you. You deserve this. She smiled softly, her fingers brushing over the necklace. Thank you, Dave. This means more to me than you know. She stood up, still holding the box, and gave me a grateful look. Stay in touch, okay? Then she walked out, leaving me sitting there with my drink. I had to admit, it felt good. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had taken control of the situation without stooping to Jenny's level. And I knew it would drive her absolutely insane when she found out the jewelry was gone. The very next day, it happened. I was at work when Jenny showed up, storming into the shop like a hurricane. She marched straight up to me, eyes blazing with fury. Where's my jewelry? She demanded. I wiped my hands on a rag, caught off guard. How'd you know I was here? She rolled her eyes. It wasn't hard to figure out. Now where's my jewelry, Dave? I crossed my arms, leaning back against the workbench. I got rid of it. Her face went pale. What do you mean, you got rid of it? That jewelry was mine. You had no right. I think I had every right, I said calmly. You lied to me. You said you only wanted your personal belongings. You never mentioned the money you took out of our accounts. Jenny's face tightened with anger. Come on, Dave. You should have known I wanted my share of the money. Lots of things I should have known, Jenny. Like the fact that my wife was cheating on me for almost a year. I shot back. But let's be clear. You didn't just take your share. You took more than half. No, I didn't, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. There was $14,250 in the account. You took over $8,000, which is more than your half. So I pawned your jewelry to cover the difference. Jenny's eyes widened in disbelief. You pawned it? Yep, I said without hesitation. $55,000 worth. Gone. Her face turned red with fury, and she opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. Oh, and you've got about 50 days left to redeem it if you want it back. Jenny glared at me, her voice shaking. How am I supposed to come up with that kind of money, Dave? I shrugged. Maybe your new man can help you out. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought she might hit me. Instead, she crossed her arms and took a deep breath. Or I could just call the cops and tell them you stole it. I smiled faintly. Go ahead. You don't have anything proving the jewelry was even in the safe deposit box. No record, no receipts. Good luck. Jenny clenched her fists, her whole body trembling with anger. This isn't over, Dave. I met her gaze, unfazed. It is for me. Now get out of here before you embarrass yourself even more. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, then turned and stormed out without another word. As I watched her go, I felt a strange sense of peace. I knew Jenny was not done with her schemes, but I had finally taken back control of my life. And no matter what she tried, I was ready for it. I figured Jenny would not let things go so easily, and I was right. The very next day, a man showed up at my job. Katie, our receptionist, paged me, saying there was someone asking for me at the front desk. When I walked up, I saw a guy in a suit standing there, flipping through his phone. Can I help you? I asked, already feeling a pit form in my stomach. Frank Keller? He asked, looking up. That's me, I replied, bracing for what I knew was coming. He handed me an envelope. You've been served. Good luck. Then he turned and walked out without another word. I opened the envelope, and there it was, the divorce papers. Just like Jenny had said, they were straightforward. No alimony requests, no big surprises. It was all standard stuff, just paperwork to end what we had once shared. I signed the papers, slipped them into the pre-addressed envelope, and dropped it in the outgoing mail tray on Katie's desk. As I turned to head back to the shop, Katie gave me a curious look. You getting a divorce? I nodded, my face expressionless. Looks like it. Well, she said, flashing a playful smile, put my name on the list when you're ready to start looking again. I laughed, a little surprised by her boldness. You're serious? Absolutely, she said, grinning. As I walked back to work, I could not help but wonder what it was other women saw in me that Jenny had somehow missed. First Wendy, then Holly, and now Katie, all showing interest. It was good for my bruised ego, for sure, but it also made me realize that maybe I had been more than enough all along. It was Jenny who had screwed up, not me. Later that evening, I called Wendy to let her know I had been served. In my mind, that meant I was officially done with Jenny, free of my vows. Wendy mentioned she had a bridal shower to attend that night, but invited me over for a celebratory dinner the next evening. It's a date, I told her, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. That night, as I sat at home eating a TV dinner, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Sarah's name. I chuckled to myself, knowing exactly what this was about. I answered the call, ready for whatever was coming. You're a real piece of work, Frank Keller, Sarah said, her voice teasing. Me? What did I do now? I asked, playing along. I just spent the last 30 minutes listening to my sister bawl her eyes out about that jewelry, she said with a laugh. She went to Mike, asking him for 10 grand to buy back the pawn ticket from you, but he told her he wouldn't have the money until his next quarterly bonus, which is 2 months away. She's absolutely losing her mind. I smirked, imagining Jenny's meltdown. So, what happened? Well, I took pity on her. I told her I had the jewelry and that I'd give it back to her, as long as I got to keep the necklace. She jumped at the offer, Sarah explained, still laughing. So thanks to you. I've got my necklace, and she's endlessly grateful to me. I could not help but laugh along with her. Well played, Sarah. Well played. Remember what I said. she added before hanging up. Stay in touch, okay? We'll see, I said, still chuckling as I hung up the phone. Whether I actually would or not depended on how things went with Wendy. Sure, Sarah and I got along well, but I had moved on, and I was not looking to keep ties with Jenny's family unless it served a purpose. The next evening, I headed over to Wendy's place for dinner. She had really gone all out. The table was set with candles, a bottle of wine, and 2 glasses. She was dressed up, looking better than ever. When I walked in, she flashed me a warm smile. Perfect timing, she said. Dinner's ready. You pour the wine and I'll bring the food. We sat down, and as we raised our glasses, Wendy smiled across the table. Here's to new beginnings, she said, her eyes sparkling. To new beginnings, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Dinner was delicious, and the atmosphere could not have been more romantic. The candlelight, the wine, the quiet conversation. It felt like a fresh start. I had finally closed the chapter with Jenny, and now I was ready to start a new one. Wendy was not shy about where she wanted the night to go either. Dessert will be in the bedroom, she said with a playful grin after we finished eating. I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me that I had not felt in a long time. As we undressed, she looked at me, her eyes filled with desire. This is where I always imagined us, back before my dad's promotion, she said softly. And just like that, everything felt right. The evening unfolded naturally, and we fell asleep in each other's arms, the past behind us. From then on, Wendy and I were pretty much a couple. We took things slow at first, but it was clear we were on the same page. Even though I felt free after the divorce papers had been served, technically, I was still married until everything was finalized. A few times, we ran into Jenny while we were out, and she always kept her distance, though I could feel her watching us, seething with anger. It was like she could not stand seeing me happy without her. About a week after the divorce was officially finalized, I did something I never thought I would do. I got down on one knee and asked Wendy to marry me. A few months after proposing to Wendy, I found myself in the basement of our new home, working on a cradle. We were expecting twins in a few months, and I had decided to build the cradle myself. As I sanded the wood, smoothing out the edges, I could not help but smile. Life had taken some wild turns, but here I was, happier than I had ever been. The basement door creaked open, and I heard Wendy's voice float down the stairs. He's down here, Dad. I put down my tools and dusted off my hands, heading upstairs to join them. Wendy's father was already settled on the couch with a drink in hand. Wendy handed me a cold beer as I sat down, and she plopped onto my lap, sipping her margarita. The conversation was light, mostly revolving around the twins. Whether we had finally picked names and why we were so stubborn about not finding out the babies' genders before they were born. But eventually, as it always seemed to, the conversation drifted to the topic we could never quite avoid. So, have you heard from your sister lately? Her dad asked, glancing at Wendy. Wendy shook her head. Not since the last time I mentioned it. Have you? Nope, her dad said with a sigh. I just wonder what's going on with her. You know, with the divorce and all. I'm not calling her to find out, Wendy replied, her voice firm. If she wants to talk, she'll call me. Her dad turned to me, raising an eyebrow. Frank always said one of them would cheat within the first year. Guess he was right. I just shrugged, giving Wendy's belly a gentle pat. Does not matter to me, I said with a smile. I'm the one who ended up with the prize. Her dad chuckled, shaking his head. You know, I must be the only father in the state whose son-in-law married both of his daughters. I still do not get how you managed to go from Grace to Alice. I smiled, leaning back in the chair. Oh, right. I probably skipped that part of the story. Wendy laughed, glancing over at me. Yeah, Dad, you missed a bit. It's a long story. Go ahead, tell him, I said, chuckling to myself. It's not as crazy as it sounds. You see, after Wendy and I got serious, I thought I had it all figured out. We had a good thing going, and I had finally moved on from Jenny. So, when I proposed to Wendy, I was sure she would say yes. But instead, she turned me down. Not in a harsh way, but it was still a no. She told me she liked me, a lot, and that she enjoyed spending time with me. But the one thing she could not say was that she loved me. I was disappointed, sure, but it made me realize something. Maybe I had just been holding on to an old high school connection that was no longer there. Life had changed us both, and trying to pick up where we left off had been wishful thinking. I moved on, though it stung a bit. Over the next few months, I started going out more. I hit up bars like the Honky Tonk Hall and Trailblazer Tavern, where they had live music and line dancing. I was enjoying life again, meeting new people, and just focusing on myself for once. Then, one night, everything changed. I was at the Stagecoach, sitting at a table after a dance, when I saw Alice Turner walk in. She was Grace's younger sister. She sat at the bar, and after a while, she came over and asked if she could join me. We got to talking, and before I knew it, she asked me why I never called her. I was surprised. Why would I have called? I asked. I thought I made it pretty clear I was moving on. Alice shrugged, giving me a sly smile. I'm not living my life to make Grace happy, or Dad, for that matter. Grace had her chance, and she blew it. She doesn't get to tell me what I can or can't do. Her confidence was refreshing, and we hit it off right away. A few months later, I proposed to Alice, and she said yes without hesitation. 6 months after that, we were married, and 8 months later, we found out we were expecting twins. Now, here we are, starting a family together. As I sat on the couch with Wendy, my wife, my partner, the woman who had stuck by me through everything, I could not help but smile. Life had thrown some curveballs my way, but I had come out on top. I had learned that sometimes, things fall apart so better things can fall into place. I glanced at Wendy, who was rubbing her belly, smiling softly to herself. Am I a happy man? I thought to myself, and the answer was easy. You bet I am.